So what is today's date?
3.
March the 3rd. This is the Housing Committee meeting. I am your chair, City Councilor Mark LaPlante. To my left, Councilor Brunel and Councilor Vice President Nilka Alvarez Rodriguez. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First part of business today, councilors, is to accept the minutes from January 27th. Is there a motion to accept?
So moved.
Motion made.
Second.
And second, all in favor, say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. We're gonna go through this real quick. The first item here is 6014, as a request for an easement of city property, Malden Mills Complex. I've been asked by an individual in the planning department if we could table this for another meeting. So there is a motion to table document 6014.
Before I table,
Sure, discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Yeah,
I'm wondering what this one is about, just so.
I can't tell you. They're looking for private, they're looking to give a presentation before us, so I can't tell you what it's about. What's,
Oh, take it in. Okay.
yeah.
Granting a permanent easement from the city for private roads in the Malden complex. Roads of access, development off 55.
Right, so that's probably more of the work that they've been doing with the,
I really can't speak to it. All I know is what's in the packet, and so I can't speak to it. And so that's why we're having Dan McCarthy from the Planning Commission has suggested that we table it. He's got the information. He said whoever was with Malden Mills, whatever reason they wanted to come, couldn't make it tonight, but wanted to come at a different meeting. So there really is nothing for us to talk about tonight on this matter, because there's really no
great.
information.
But anybody out there interested in what's going on in that area may be interested in this meeting as well. You know, the next housing meeting.
Okay.
Motion to table.
Motion made.
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Document 28713, this is roof of Holy Rosary Building. I know that there was a counselor who had some interest in this. I know there have been some individuals who had some interest in this. I'm not sure how much depth we want to go into this tonight, because we do want to focus on alleyways this evening. So if we wanted to focus on other items this evening. So want to give it, Mr. Rice, since he is here, he can give us a brief update as to what's going on and what the status is, and then we could take it from there. Mr. Ricensi, welcome.
Thank you, Council. How are you?
Pretty well, thank you. We have one colleague here who was not part of the council when this thing came on board. Could you, just as a refresher, kind of give us a summary of what the issue is there at this, and what the request is?
I believe there's a concern about the condition of the Holy Rosary School, which, if the council is not aware, is a building, a surplus building the city has that is unoccupied, has been unoccupied for quite a many years now, and there's some folks who live in the neighborhood who have an eye towards preservation, who would like to try to preserve the building in whatever condition we could, to the best of our abilities, until something becomes of it, or someone comes and takes ownership of it and makes it into something. There was some issues have arisen with the roof. We did go up and take a quick look. At one point, you could, from inside the building, look up and see, the bright blue sky. Never good in a building. We did go up and take a peek, however, and found that the roof condition itself wasn't all that bad. Some venting, roof structures above some vents that are there need some, clearly are deteriorated, need some serious work. But the gist of the blue sky was visible through a hatch that had merely blown off and exposed the inside to the elements. So as we exited, the folks put the hatch back on, it kind of closed up that opening. Should satisfy the roof portion of the leakage. Every window is essentially needs to be boarded up. We've boarded up the ones that were near the fire escape. Some folks are fairly crafty, get up the fire escape, kind of wiggle around a corner, get in an open window. We've secured a good portion of those as well. We've removed a lot of the graffiti from the building. It's not so prevalent now. The spray cans don't work as well in the cold weather. So that kind of keeps the graffiti at bay for a little while. We did say we'd keep an eye for illegal dumping that may go on behind it. We have some cameras we use in inspectional services to monitor areas where we see excessive dumping. When that becomes a problem, we'll get on top of that. But as far as expending additional monies out of our operational budget to kind of essentially take care of a building that's really not, it doesn't have any inhabitants in it right now. We'd be throwing some pretty good money after a building that really we need to put towards buildings that are occupied.
Do I have the
Yeah,
floor?
you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now, a few years back, I gather, when I was last on the council, every year this building would come up, and people had some ideas, like for a performing arts center,
I like that.
or, something of the sort. But now it sounds like it would be really costly, for any,
Some years
You take
back,
it
yeah,
off.
some years back, I mean, the exterior structure of the building, the brickwork is spectacular. It really is something to be preserved. The Performing Arts Center, I think the city lacks that. You go to the MRT in Lowell, it's a really fine attraction. They're booked pretty solid. Lawrence could certainly use that. That might be a great use for that building, particularly with the parking available around the common and whatnot. And it does have its own small parking lot. However, I do think that there was some fairly steep price tags associated with the rehabilitation of that building. Somewhere north of $4 million at one point, I believe, was banded about. I do know there is a local contractor who has shown some interest in it, done some tours through that building with the Community Development Department, and as I believe has probably met with the current administration and made some kind of quick proposal to them as well. So there is hope for that building. I mean, if you look at the exterior of it, absolutely you'd want to preserve it.
and hopefully maybe community development could look for some grants towards the arts. I know that.
Yeah, I for the life of me, I think that we do need an MRT, some kind of a repertory theater in the area, Performing Arts Center here. I think the city's lacking that. I know that the high school has a pretty big stage and performance area, but I think that one would do nicely around this downtown area.
Right. And possibly even work with Merrimack College. They have, fantastic
Yeah, and like I say, when you look at the,
department for the arts. And
when you look at the facade of the building, it's just some magnificent work. You really hate to see that go to waste.
Sure. Well, thank you.
You're very welcome.
That was it.
Okay. All right. So what we're going to do, I think, at this point is we'll table this item, unless another counselor has another.
Were we gonna take action on it, or do we wanna withdraw the item?
I mean, it's a question, a lot of it's a question of money and putting resources toward it. And I just, maybe we've done what we're supposed to do here, which is to shine a little bit of a light on it, to bring some information to us about what's happening there. And maybe we're satisfied as far as information. At this point, it takes a concerted effort to bring money, other resources, and that, obviously, we're limited as to what we bring to the table on that. That's a function of the mayor's office, most specifically either CD or, part of your department as well.
My thought might be that perhaps when the spring comes around, we give it a good cleaning and take some photographs of the structure and then, market it out there somehow. A lot of folks don't even know that's there. If we don't try to sell ourselves in a positive way, and that's a positive piece right there, just need someone to take it by the hand and lead it down the road to success, so.
Can I ask you a quick question? I am familiar with the building, but just trying to be, does it punch through to Essex Street, or does it strictly have the access through Common Street for the school building?
It just comes through, actually, it's Summer Street that it's on. And it's in between Newbury,
Okay,
Jackson.
okay.
You really, you could see it from the hall here, but you really gotta know where to look, and, yeah, it's so close to Jackson Street that really you'd think that there's the parking, and there is.
Well, that's what I was saying, is the parking, it seemed like that
There's
would
a
be the
little
biggest.
parking lot associated with it as well.
There is, okay.
Yeah, it's probably a 20 spot,
Okay,
and there's an alley to the rear.
okay. That's what I was thinking, is that for the marketability, would there be any parking?
The other part of it is the gas company is in that area upgrading all the gas lines in there, and we're looking at doing some road rehab work in there. And like I say, it might be the right time to kind of spruce up the parking lot, make it look as presentable as possible, and get some shots out there of it.
Yeah. It's a good idea.
All right, so, I mean, again, we can certainly send it up to the council as a withdrawal, unless there's anybody has a pressing need to keep it here. But I'm not hearing that.
Well,
I'm not sure this is just taking paper at this point, unless we're really serious about taking action on it.
well, Mr. Chair, I just think it appeared that the issue here was the roof, and he's taken care of it.
Yeah, we basically
So-
sealed up what we can there without expending any cost at this point, so.
Right, so then there's nothing else, no further action, I would think.
Okay, is there a motion?
I would make a motion to withdraw document number 28713.
Motion made
Second.
and second. Here with no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Thank you, counselors. Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
The resident that has taken a shine to the building, if she has any concerns at all, she's welcome to, contact me directly, and I'll assure her that we will keep an eye on it for vagrancy, graffiti, illegal dumping, et cetera.
Thank you.
Certainly, you've worked a long day, Mr. Arsensi. You're obviously, I'm not your boss, but you're free to go home at any point now. But you may want to stick around as well, because we're about to enter the enchanted world of alleyways. And, you really? It should be robust
God.
and vibrant. And leading the debate this evening will be Mr. Body, the city attorney, who is going to set the table for us on alleyways. Because as counselors, let's pull this off the table. Let's see here. Is there a number on here?
Document number 288-A.
A dash,
288-A. Is there a motion to take off the table? Motion made.
So moved.
And second, all in favor, say aye. The ayes
Aye.
have it. And so let me start setting the table on this document, because we have agreed as a committee that we are going to tackle, as best we can, the issues of alleyways in the city. And we understand that this could be a Herculean task, and so we're setting our expectations at a reasonable level. And we're going to deal with them individually, one at a time. I have my alleyway book that was published by MIT back in 2010, I think, or 11. And I did a count of about 134 alleyways in the city. And so, if we look at it, it'd be not mind-numbing as to how many we got to do. So rather than going through 134, the task that I think that we as a committee are going to assign ourselves is to pull an alleyway that we want to work on and just work on it, slowly go through the process. Each alleyway has unique properties, unique usages. Some are similar, but if we can start to work through them, the first few here might be a little more challenging as we start getting revved up. But with the help of the city attorney and his staff and other members of the city, I think we can start a process on that. So let me start off with this. So I sent the city attorney, Charles Body, an alleyway that I'm looking to do. And that alleyway, and there's many in my district, this is one that was high in prominence back a couple years ago, where there was some illegal dumping that was taking place there. And we got some publicity on that to showcase, the problems with it. Now I wanted to follow up on that particular alleyway and get that one cleaned up and moved on. That's the alleyway that's between Bailey and Salem, between Foster and South Union Street. So if you're familiar with where that is, the street numbers are 124 to 172 Bailey, 88 to 98 Foster, and it's an alleyway that's there. And so what I received already from the city assessor's office is the names of the individuals who own the properties there. So as soon as we're ready to pull the trigger on an action item, we're going to go ahead and submit a letter to those abutters, or to the owners of those properties, and let them know what the potential game plan is, and invite them in so we can have a conversation. But meanwhile, I sent to city attorney that alleyway, and he sent back to me that now here's where we're looking for some help. So there's a couple of different kinds of alleyways, some that have been accepted and some that have not been accepted, if I understand correctly. And so this is one of those alleyways that has not been accepted, is my understanding. And with that comes a series of other hoops and hurdles that we have to cross. So, and now that I've set the table on that specific one, maybe, Attorney, you can talk in general about the alleyways in the city, and then you can be more specific about this one, and then some of the other ones that the other counselors may have, if they have them already tonight. You're on.
Okay, thank you. There are several different types of alleys, as you indicated, in the city. We have alleys that are owned by us and therefore maintained by us. There are also alleys that are privately owned. The majority of the alleys that are problems now are alleys which have never been owned by the city, and in fact, most of them were owned by the Essex Company. And in 1992 or 3, I forget the exact year, the Essex Company filed at the Registry of Deed an affidavit as to the title, 92, September of 92. They filed an affidavit with the Registry of Deeds, and the affidavit basically disclaimed any interest of the Essex Company in a certain list of alleys, and there were alleys that are far spread out throughout the city, including the one that runs between Bailey and Salem Street and Foster and South Union. Their intent in doing that was to essentially limit their liability, their exposure, their obligations to maintain, upkeep, plow, and whatever else might be needed in those alleyways. Because of this document that was filed, we have had, over the past decade, many inquiries from abutters in particular who want to buy the alleyway and, expand their yard, which is a very laudable purpose. However, we don't own it, and for that reason, we can't sell it to them. On the other hand, there's a statute, and I was trying to find it this evening beforehand. I wasn't able to do it, but I can get it to you, that says that when an alleyway is abandoned, that the abutters on either side of it own up to the midpoint or the center point of the way. So in this case, if you had property owner on one side of an alley and he also owned on the other side, he'd own that entire parcel, would become one contiguous parcel. If you had two different property owners on either side, they would basically split the alley right down to the midpoint. And at that point, if there were no other interests, they could fence it off, loom it, seed it, whatever they want to do, pave it, whatever they'd want to do with it, they could do that. The problem with these particular alleys is many of them are 100, 150 years old. Many of them have, by the passage of time and the passage of people, have resulted in easements going across. So what you typically have in a typical alley configuration here in Lawrence, with some exceptions, but you have two thoroughfares, and between them runs this alley, which is backs up against backyards of the property on the other two streets, similar to what we have in Salem and Bailey Streets. And over the years, we've had, in some alleyways, we've had garbage pickups through there. We've had some commercial buildings. If there are commercial properties, they keep their dumpsters in the back. They have a private hauler come in and take their dumpsters and so forth. And we also have private residential property owners who use that as an additional means of access to their property. Just for an example, one of the unusual properties that we have in the city is Jackson Terrace, and in Jackson Terrace, there is no vehicular access to the properties through the terrace itself, so they have to go through the alleys, because those houses were built before there were cars, and they were built right down in the center of the city, and there was no need necessarily for them to have transportation. They could walk to wherever they want. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your point of view, by the time the 20th century came about, we have cars, and so what they did in many instances, they built garages with garage doors facing onto the alley so they could drive down the alley and park. So we have a whole different set of overlaying interests in the alleys, not just the abutters, but you would have, for example, you would have an abutter on one extreme end who might, let's say on this instance, you have a property on Bailey Street at the Foster Street side who has for 30 or 40, 50, 60 years used that alleyway for walking or even for his vehicle to get to South Union Street, gone through the back alley to get there. And for an abutter to then come along and put up a fence would be a problem if the abutter who's been using that for passage for 50 years suddenly says, well, hey, wait a minute, I don't want to have my ability to cross the back route extinguished. So, I guess the answer is, well, I don't know what the purpose is. I'm assuming the purpose of some of this study is to look at means by which the alleyways could get into private ownership and abutters could have interest in them. And if that's the case, first and foremost, the city has no interest, so we're not really a party to that. However, we could be a party to the solution, perhaps. When Northern Essex came to develop the Health Technology Center at the old In-Town Mall, we had an alleyway going through there, which actually at one point became a structured internal alleyway, and we had to extinguish the rights. We had to get waiver of access rights from all of the abutters, so forth, so that we could essentially demolish the In-Town Mall, create a new open alley, just as it was in the 60s and closed in the 70s, and to extinguish certain rights because for security purposes, Northern Essex Community College didn't want a lot of passage through that alleyway. There was a belief that such passage could create crime, could bring people into the campus that they don't want, and so forth. So, it's been done. There are forms that we in the City Attorney's Office have used in conjunction with Northern Essex to extinguish those interests in that alleyway in particular. And if the abutters, if you had a set of abutters on Bailey and Salem Streets, for example, in this quadrant that we're discussing, and they all were similarly minded, and they all agreed that they would like to own it up to the center line, or some of them might want to own it to the back line if they can get the abutter on the other side to agree. There could be deals made so that properties could be expanded, the alleyway could be extinguished, but really to extinguish that alleyway, it would require an agreement from all of the abutters who might have cross easements over time in the alleyways. And absent a unified mind to extinguish those easements, the other thing the city could potentially do, and it's risky and expensive, is we could take the alleyways by eminent domain. It's a long process. It would require potentially payment for the easement interests, but then when we had it, we could potentially subdivide it out and sell it. It would be a fairly, as I said, expensive and also laborious process, but it could be done.
Hold that thought for one moment. Councilor Brunel's got a quick question.
I just had a question about the eminent domain aspect, only in light of the fact that they were actually granted to us at one time through that affidavit document.
That doesn't grant them to us.
So what does it, just was a release?
It's an abandonment of their interest, yeah.
Okay.
That's
I
all
didn't know
it
if
is.
we could somehow use that to expedite the process. Do you know what I
Well,
mean?
they don't have an interest in it,
So-
so the only interest would
We
be the abutters.
fighting with the, yeah. We wouldn't be fighting with them per se, we'd be fighting, I guess, with the, well, not necessarily fighting, but working with the abutters, because they would be no interest from the, former owner.
No, in fact, I'm convinced, based on our relationship and our negotiations on prior issues with the Essex Company, that if we wanted to get them to sign waivers for particular alleyways, we could do that very easily. They'd never have. On things like this, they're so anxious to abandon it. If we said to them, fine, we already have this document from '92, we'd like to have something that's particular to this alley that further extinguishes your rights, or conveys it to the abutters, and we could name them, we could get that, I'm sure, with just some negotiation. It wouldn't be a long process. The problem, the main problem here is, as I see it, and I may not perceive the entire problem, but the main problem is that you have abutters who sometimes have competing interests. If all the abutters have the same thing, if they want to own this land, and they're willing to give up their rights to cross Joe's property and cross Ann's property because they want to get their share of it, everybody agrees to that, I think it's a fairly easy process. It's not necessarily one that the city is involved in, but it is an easy process. The only problem you have is when you have 2, 3, 4 or more people who aren't in agreement, that they don't want to block it off, they want to continue to be able to pass because they feel, for one reason or another, that they have that right and they don't want to give it up. It's got some value to them.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, hold on one second. So my question is that in talking with Councilor President Maldonado, one of the things that let me back up. In this particular alleyway, Bailey and Salem, there are people that are using it for their cars. They're looking to use the back, parking in the back. And looking at the MIT report,
Which I haven't seen. I interrupt you, but I haven't seen.
that's fine,
Yep.
and I think it's online, and I put it on my Facebook page, but I'll try to get that over to you. Most of the alleyways are being used by people for that purpose, which is to get their vehicle off of the main street and safely tuck it in the back. Don't have to worry about the alternate side parking, and they believe that it's on their property, it's a little safer, and so that's what most of the people that I'm seeing are using it for. So they're gonna have to cross over other people's property interests to get to their property. So what the council president was suggesting was maybe at one side, blocking off access, so there's not through access anymore. And it can be discussed as to which side, in this particular case, is it the South Union Street side, or is it the Foster Street side? But the idea being is that what's appealing, should be appealing to those people is that they're gonna have control over that property, A. B, the illegal dumping that people dump and then head off in the other direction will
It's gonna
most likely,
stop.
I'm not sure it'll stop completely, but it'll be a deterrent for that. Number two, any kind of prostitution becomes less likely. Drug deals that may be going on back there are less likely because you're going through a dead end street. There's gonna be something hard at that end of the street. It's not gonna be just bushes. It's gonna be a structure of some sort that's gonna make it hard. That's like you can't get through. And that is supposed to be the enticement of the people there saying, your property value is gonna increase, you're gonna still be able to park there, and in the meantime, dumping is gonna go down, prostitution will go down, drug sales will go down, and you still get to have that usage. And hopefully that's what's gonna be appealing to them. I know Councilor Alvarez had
Go
a
ahead,
question, and I'm not sure if she wanted
Go
to
ahead,
ask
yeah.
about that.
After you
I'd like
done.
to respond to that too when you have a chance.
Well, people want to respond to that, good.
Okay, so go ahead, finish responding.
That's
About this.
much
that's-
more easily done. All you have to have for that is an extinguishment of the rights of exit to one street or another. And even better security, if you could get everybody to agree, is to install gates, both sides. And that way, the only people who have access are the abutting property owners. They can still drive their vehicles, they'd have to get out and perhaps unlock and open a gate, or they could even, if they had the money, they could have one of those automatic gates or, with a photoelectric eye. But there's no reason why, if everyone agrees that they couldn't block off both exits. The only concern I would have is if, and I don't believe it's the case in this alleyway that we're discussing now, if that alleyway is needed for fire protection or, well, it wouldn't be need for police protection, but fire protection, then we'd obviously want to make sure that the fire department has access to that as well. But, I mean, even if it's ungated, unlocked, I should say, a gate at both ends where somebody has to get out of the car, open it up to drive in, would prevent a lot of that, and if everyone agreed to it, it could be done on these alleys that have been abandoned.
Councilor Brunel had a point regarding that.
Just on the same topic, I was confused, so I just wanted to back it up for 1 second. You were saying that, to cut back on all these different, crime and different, whatever, I have two different situations on different alleys. Some where the people definitely need and want the access. They have literally their 3-stall garage built behind their house for their 3 tenement. It works for them, it works for their tenants, and it gets the cars off the street, so it works for the whole neighborhood. Something with a gate might work for the whole neighborhood too. But I don't know how we would prohibit access. Like, they have prescriptive easements rights up and down that alley. They've been using it well over 20 years without their consent, which is just kind of what we're talking about. I don't know how we could put any kind of barricade or, I have certain alleys where people want to barricade up the alley, obviously, but I have some that people will be very upset. It will definitely be a deterrent and a reduction to their property value where they've got garages that rely on that alley. There's no other way to get the car back there. So my just concern was if we do start chopping up the alleys, that people lose those easement rights that they have, the courts would recognize over time they have developed those easement rights prescriptively through the land, and I just want us to keep that in mind. That's why I wasn't quite sure what you said when you were saying about the specific example you were giving. Was it that some people, like, on the ends could still access it, but not have the people in the middle do it? Is that what you're kind of envisioning?
No, in the conversation with the council president, what he envisioned was having one access point. the other access point being completely off, and so we're gonna be blocked off. And so people would still be able to go through that alleyway, cross over
I
your
see. Yeah,
property,
yeah,
their
yeah.
property, his property, your property, get to your own property potentially at the very end. So you would travel to that very end, so they would still need to have those easement rights, but, and again, it's gonna
But it
have to
would be
be,
full flow, it's just kind of slow down kids from speeding back there or whatever.
You'd have to turn
Vehicle
around
traffic, extra
to exit it. Once you
Yeah.
go in, the only way out would be to turn around and come back out.
exactly.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, okay.
Is that still a concern in your world about?
It
if that were-
might be,
yeah.
only because like the specific one I was thinking of is that one that runs parallel to Andover Street on Farnham Street. I know both houses near the ends use it. I don't know what the middle of that alley looks like. I've never gone far enough in to know if it's passable. I know like 2 or 3 homes on the westerly end use it and 2 or 3 homes on the easterly end use it. I don't know about the middle homes and I don't know how bad the alley is back there. Do you know what I mean? So you might need some major repair to make that scenario work. But it doesn't mean it would be prohibited. It just means we'd have to really look at it a little bit more clearly, you know.
And if they're gonna take control over it, I mean, it's gonna be up to them as to how much work they're gonna wanna be, whether it's the cleanup, whether it's the plowing, snow removal, whether it's, because the DPW director's here, now I'm gonna put him on the spot, but I'm gonna throw him a softball. Do we plow the alleyways, Mr. Vicenci? If you come to the mic and answer that question?
We plow, and we do plow them,
I wanna get to you, Nick, I've forgotten you.
Okay.
we do about 50 of them, including the ones downtown here, and they clearly are not first priority, they come after
Is
the.
it 50 we do?
We do about 50.
Why those 50 and not others?
Just because, like
People are using
Counselor
it.
Brunel, people live there, they call, we can't get in. There's a number of them. Broadway area has some that run parallel, that some of the store owners use as access and whatnot. So we do try to provide those that are used fairly regularly with some service. Like I say, it is not the first thing we do. It's generally when we go to sidewalks, we run with a backhoe through those 50 alleys.
So that would be an issue then. For those that aren't part of the 50, the magic 50, then it's going to be an issue as far as there needs to be some sort of cooperation between the neighbors to figure out how they're going to get the snow out. Clearly, they must be doing it already. Something's happening.
Yeah, when I hear you say that you need cooperation from everybody in the neighborhood, and you've got an alley that maybe cover, 40 houses, someone may be dropping their groceries using the alley or having an event in there. They got a couple cars parked in there, and you're way down the end, you need to get out. One way out might really create some pretty nasty attitudes.
Yeah,
The
so
only-
that is true.
After,
Counselor, you've been very patient. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I'd like, before I ask a couple of questions, I was wondering, with that MIT report,
That's not it.
oh, okay.
But I have it at my house, which is not
Yeah, I
helpful.
could use a copy of it, or do they still have some?
It's bound, I have a bound copy. I'm not sure there's still any left. That came out of the planning department, but the good news is that it's electronic and online. I put it on my Facebook page, and I think I might have just gotten rid of but I think I have it posted on my Facebook page.
So in that report,
copy, too.
does it include those that are, do they identify those alleyways that we accepted and the alleyways that we have not accepted?
No, they don't break it down. Here's what the report lists. It lists 134 alleyways throughout the city. It has a picture of them. It has where the alleyways are located. It has a map of where the alleyways, so you can reorient yourself.
Right.
And then it talks about usage or recommended usage at that alleyway. I think it's as simple as that.
Okay. And is it possible to get the,
Copy of the core ones that we do?
yeah, those 50?
Yeah, we actually have that.
Can you get
Yeah,
us a
we have that
copy?
electronically as well.
A list?
Absolutely.
Send me a list of that, please. And I use my gmail.com address. I don't use the city of Florence address. Okay.
I'll find you.
Thank you. But I would like to see which 50 we're talking about. And if any of those 50s happen to belong to the XX company. It's not one of the ones that were given.
Yeah, I wouldn't
that
know
we
one way or another
accepted.
who owns them. We know folks complain, they want them plowed, they're concerned they got a foot of snow, whatever. We push through.
And maybe we could find out,
Oh, yeah.
through you, Mr. Chair, from the city attorney, which are which, and that would be helpful.
The last thing we need is another
Because
130
I also
streets to
think,
maintain.
you're saying that you still have ongoing contact with the Essex company?
I have contact with the Essex Company from time to time because there's always something that we're involved in we're generally looking for some rights in property they own, usually easements, could be construction easements, et cetera, but we always have something going on with them. And I've dealt with them in terms of getting, on some of situations like this, getting them to give us releases of their interest. What I do want to say, and I thought about
If I
this.
may, before you.
Yeah, go ahead.
on, What I would like to see is, have we ever given them a bill for the work that we've done on alleyways that are clearly still under their domain, even if they've,
I don't know that we've ever done work on alleyways that they own.
I'm with you.
thank you.
We do an awful lot of
We
cleanup of
didn't
that.
accept them, yet we're doing all this work on them, so.
Yeah, the past couple of years, Counselor in District F, we've tried to do some grading over in that alley that sees a lot of action.
I remember that.
We've taken some road wrap that we've ground up out of old Chapter 90 jobs, stockpiled it and gone in and kind
That
of graded
goes
that up.
way back even to Gosselin,
Yeah,
with the grading of those particular alleys.
yeah, we've tried to, in the wintertime, it gets sloppy, people are using them, they get ruts in them, cars are getting stuck.
Right.
They're really not our responsibility, but we feel that a kinship to the folks who have to use them, and if we can help them in some way, we feel we ought to.
I would like to see if there's a possibility of billing them, because we could use that money for, I guess, doing any rehab that needs to be done in the alleyways that we identified.
Well, they continually overgrow. I mean, every year, they're like a forest, and we've had to buy equipment to actually kind of mow that stuff down.
Right.
Just because of the complaints become so rampant, and I could see why. I mean, people just buzz through these little jungles in the back of their yard, and, people fly through there with a truckload of debris and just lift the body, drop it in the middle, and drive away.
I know.
We don't, it looks like a forest we drive through in the winter, try to push through, and we're up against, 5 yards of drywall.
That is so true. That is so true. And not to talk about all the drug paraphernalia that's left behind.
Well, if there's a crevice or a place to tuck
The
themselves
worst
in
is the
there,
bodies, but,
they'll find it. The maintenance of them is pretty extensive. Generally, Groundworks will come in and help us out a little bit.
yeah, it's costly, it's a lot of man-hours.
A ton of man-hours. And then when they get rid of the debris has to be taken somewhere, which we have to deal with that as well.
And then it's the city who's being blamed
Yeah, we
for
pay.
not maintaining, So, I don't know, maybe the city attorney knows who would look into the billing. Should we, I mean,
We
is
need
that
to make
something
sure, first of all, we need to find out which alleyways we're actually doing work on. Then we need to make sure that Essex Company owns them and that Essex Company hasn't abandoned them.
That's what I
We
want.
had a very embarrassing situation last October, November, December with the Essex Company going back and forth over the maintenance of some area by the canals because it was all overgrown and looked lousy.
Right.
And after pushing to get them to go out and do the repairs, they did. They went out and they cleaned it all up, and then came back to us and said, and by the way, we've got an agreement with you from, 1965 or something. This isn't our responsibility. The city accepted the responsibility for the maintenance of this area, blah, 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 blah. So, we came out with egg on our face because we're pushing them to clean it, and in reality, it was our obligation to do it. So we need to find out which alleys we're
Right,
doing work
which is
on,
why I need
and out
to
of
know-
those, which are owned by the Essex Company, and to the extent that they're owned by the Essex Company, have they been abandoned? If they're not abandoned, then I think we could send them a bill, but we'd have to then break down the amounts that are of time and labor, materials, et cetera, that are
I'm
used in
hoping
each
we
of the
can
alleys.
all work together on that, because having some extra dollars would help in doing any rehab that we want to do. It will give us capital to work on these alleyways. I mean, there is no budget line item specifically to, maybe we have to put tar on them, I don't know, whatever, if it doesn't become part of the abutters properties, especially those that the fire department may say we need, okay? So that's another area that I think we need to look at as we're doing all this planning. So naturally, it makes sense to take one alleyway and sort of use that as the model so that we can then, figure out how to do the rest. And continue to plan from knowing which are the alleyways that we own or accepted ownership for, and that the Essex company abandoned, right? Because the city attorney, through you, Mr. Chair, is there a difference when we say they gave it to us as a gift and we accept it, and versus they gave us a notice of abandonment?
Yes, they haven't
It's a
given us anything. The only way that the city acquires an interest in any of these alleys is if it's offered to us and the city council takes a 2/3 vote to accept it. Otherwise, we don't own it. And in this case, what they did was just abandon it. So they didn't give it to us, but many people believe they did. There's been a misconception for years that they gave it, they conveyed it to the city.
Right.
Even if they had tried to do that without a vote from you, even if they said, we convey to the city of Lawrence, without a confirmation by this council that the property's been accepted, it's not ours.
Right, so it was always my understanding that there was no formal acceptance.
No, there was not. This has been
So that
researched
means
for years.
None of them.
Yeah, no.
So-
Well, no,
Yeah,
none of
'cause
them
I'm
on
getting a
this
little
list.
confused.
None of them on this list. There have been some that we've had an interest in that we've acquired.
Okay.
And other properties. But the ones that have been abandoned, no, they weren't, because there would have been no need to abandon them if we had accepted them.
Right. Okay, so, in order for, I guess, me to be helpful to my colleagues and the committee, I would need that data and the 50 that you're working on, and then identifying which of those 50 are ours or were abandoned or what.
Yeah, and I can
And-
work with you on that.
Yeah, and then if
At the
we
end of the
can.
50, we go over, compare it to this list to figure it out.
And then, Counselor Body, if we looked at the alleyways that you have identified as abandoned or that we have accessed, have asked for the use of it and have obtained,
The city engineer
Your
would know
approval?
that.
so it would be the city engineer? Mm-hmm. So through you,
Which
Mr. Chair,
John
could we
works
ask
with,
the
John and
city
I can work
engineer?
with the city engineer on that, too.
Oh, you'll do that?
Yeah, he works with
Well,
John.
that'll be helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, that'll be very helpful. Because that kind of data, we could really, write up a nice plan on how we're gonna move on the alleyways. And we don't necessarily just have to, say, let's work on one and see how it goes. But I think we also need to look into all these little nuances of of preparing to tackle these alleyways.
There's another issue that I kind of glossed over, and I thought about it while I was sitting down a little bit more, and I need to bring it to your attention, and that is, when we did this with Northern Essex on the alleyway between Common and Essex Streets, we had to research each of the titles. We did a title examination of each of the abutting parcels, because we not only had to get the sign-off from the owners, but also the mortgage holders and anyone else with an interest in the property. And so, Bailey and Salem Streets, perhaps, we wouldn't see so much of that. We probably have one mortgage holder and the property owner. But when you get here, sometimes you have multiple mortgages. When you get into the commercial areas, you get more, some people who have taken back a mortgage or may have some sort of an easement or interest in the land that's not been extinguished. So we need to, one of the things we need to be sure of, or that the abutters would need to be sure of, is that we notify anybody in the chain of title that has any unextinguished interest in the property, because they potentially would have some interest in the easement going one way or the other. Again, I think that the quickest and easiest way, if everyone could agree to it, is simply not to necessarily extinguish any rights of passage, but put up gates. It solves the problem of crime. And the gates can be opened to allow the city to plow through if it's an alleyway that the city plows. Because if you have a gate, and the gate, or if you build a wall, a permanent wall, let's say, at one end or another, or both, you're gonna have a problem getting a plow in. The plow's gonna plow all the snow down to the end, and then the person who has that last property next to the gate may not be able to access their garage in the back or what have you.
I remember, I was still here when Northern Essex came up for the alleyway, for that easement. And I remember that you had to do all that work.
You know, the blessing of that process is we now have a paradigm, we now have an example to follow. So we've got the documents. If we were to use them, we have the documents for the extinguishment of the easement rights and interests. We know how to do it. We've done it. I suspect, on a citywide basis, as you already pronounced, it's a Herculean project. I mean, it could take, you get bogged down for years. I think you get bogged down for a long time just on one alleyway, but if you take one at a time, you can work your way through it. It's going to take attention, it's going to take time, it's going to take cooperation, not only from the city side, but more important and more probably from the abutters. But if the abutters all share a vision, then we can help them make it happen.
And that's what I'm saying, if we can get a few dollars, from billing for work that we've done, that may help us get people from your department to be able to focus on those alleyways.
Yeah. It would be nice if...
The money would be helpful, is what I'm saying.
It would be nice if people had their title exam done whenever they purchase the property, and we could get copies of that to avoid having to do a lot of research. In fact, I would not recommend that we do that research, because we could have some liability if we make mistakes, and we'd end up farming it out anyway, which would be costly. You're talking $700 per parcel.
But we could ask the owners to do that. Make them part of the project, like both my colleagues here have mentioned, there are people that are using it, so in order to do something great with those alleyways, all of the abutters need to be a part of that. All right, so you would also know which fire department, or have they told you already?
No.
Which alleyways the fire department?
No, I know some of the ones, mostly, I think we're talking about commercial properties. The residential properties, I think they have access from the main streets, and they don't have a problem with it. I know 2 or 3 years ago, the fire department was concerned about some access to commercial structures from the back because of the nature of the structures and the things they contain. They may contain flammables and things. They were interested in having access from both ways. So, but again, that's an internal discussion. If we identify, again, if you pick the alleyway we're going to focus on and we work towards it, the first thing that we do on the city side is contact the police and fire and say, we need to know what the goal is. We're assuming we're going to be closing off an end of it at least.
Right.
We say to the fire department, we'd like to close off one of the ends of this alleyway. Is that going to be a problem for you in terms of fire safety?
Right.
And if not, then you go ahead. And if it is, then I think we bring everybody to the table and talk about it.
Maybe we can even send a letter to the fire chief and just ask them which alleyways are you using already. I think that's something we can do through here. So you guys,
I'm happy to send a letter to Fire Chief Marsh on this alleyway, if that's what you'd like me to do right now, but I don't know that at the subcommittee level that's what you want, but I'm happy to do that.
My thought would be, as we go through this, two thoughts. One is, I asked if we could all bring in, and if you don't have it tonight, that's fine too, but there's only 4 of us on the committee, and so we could bring 4 alleyways together, and some are gonna move faster than others, there's gonna be sticking points on some, less sticking points on the other. But if we identify 4 and we say, these are the 4 we're gonna work on, then we can start working on it, because each one of us is gonna work on it at a different speed as well. So, I would recommend that, number 1. Number 2, what we should find out is, once we identify those alleyways, then we can figure out, is that one of the 50, is that one of the, is that the fire department? I mean, if they have these things already, what I don't wanna do is have other department heads spend a lot of time doing stuff if we're not gonna be doing some of the other work. So, but if it's
Mr.
easy,
Chair,
if it's easy, then they can just do it.
I would volunteer the time to put that information together once the data is available, and all of the councilors could have it now. And I do have one, which is the Broadway one, where the 2 murders occurred. That needs quick attention, but I don't know if we own it or.
One comment and one aside. The comment is that I think it would be particularly helpful to me, and I think John may feel the same way, but I don't want to speak for him, that if we put together a working group, as we choose you folks choose the alleyways. It's irrelevant to me which you choose, but you choose the alleyways, and then take the counselors from the district, the counselor or what have you, from that district, along with the abutters, and to meet with us and move a process forward where we have, monthly meetings or what have you, and check the progress and see how things go. I think that's going to be helpful, because one of the parts that I would be interested in getting is the abutters' input and what their vision is.
Right.
Because not every neighborhood is going to have the same shared vision. Some may,
Exactly.
And then as an aside, we were sued, just interestingly enough, I want to call this to your attention. We, the city, were sued about an alleyway behind North Broadway.
Right.
On this side, on the easterly side of Broadway, where Arbella Insurance Company sued us because their insured's vehicle was driving down this alleyway and hit a pothole and took out the axle and so forth and so on. It was a
God.
major damage to the car. We had the case dismissed because it wasn't any alleyway that we controlled. So it just gives you some perspective as to some of the liabilities that are inherent in these alleyways and why we need to be thoughtful and measured about how we deal with them. So,
In that particular, the alleyway that I am looking at, and again, if the district councilor is okay, I mean, I don't want to step on people's toes, that one really needs to be looked at. And, but I don't know if we own it. I don't know if it was abandoned. Basically, I don't know any of that. So if, again, I volunteer to put the information together with a little glossary too about what's the difference between abandoned and, all that, to share with all the counselors. When you're a counselor at large, there's an issue that, people who are district counselors might get a little upset about you doing, very direct work in the district.
oh, sure.
So I have to make sure that this North Broadway alley is okay with the district counselor.
So why don't we do this, Council Vice President? Identify that alleyway, talk to that district counselor,
Sure.
and then clearly you can have that kind of conversation. We're trying to keep it at 1 block rather than multiple blocks, so the block that I'm looking on is 1 block. That way we're trying to make it more manageable. So whatever that is, whatever you want to work it out to, and just, if you wouldn't mind, just CC me, let me be aware of what that, it's
Well, I
choose.
would do it for us.
Yeah, whatever one you're gonna choose, that's fine, and hopefully we'll have 4 alleyways that we can work on each one of them.
Oh, and the
I
alleyways.
wouldn't wanna-
And the other stuff that I'm gonna do, I'll make sure you
That's-
guys get it.
Okay, good.
I'd like to get an email on it sooner rather than later. I understand you need information from us before you can do that, but I'd like to get an email on that so that we can be prepared and come back with abutters' names and so forth before we meet. But second, I think 4 alleys would be enough to start, because
Yeah, it's plenty.
we want to accomplish something, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think if we spread ourselves too thin, we'll get a lot of progress done on many alleys instead of finishing 1 or 2, and that's what I'd like to see us do, so it's
So one council will be sponsoring an alley, so to speak, that may be a poor choice of words, but that way we could shepherd one, and we'll be on top of it. It's more manageable kind of thing. Council, I know you have some questions or comments as well.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
No, it was great. When I hear the word Broadway, I think commercial, so I just, in addition to alley and easement rights that people have, our zoning bylaws require commercial properties to have more than one means of egress. So sometimes keeping that alley open is required by a zoning bylaw, so somebody builds their commercial building, and it's approved by the planning and zoning boards because it has that rear alley, so it's seen as a second means of egress, and then we go and have the alley abandoned and chopped up, we may be hurting ourselves. So it's just something to keep in mind as you're looking at a specific alley, especially in the Broadway section, that our commercial bylaws do require properties to have that second means of egress. So if that's, and in some of them, they may not be the case. They may have, you know, an alternative means on the side, maybe a corner lot, and it'd be just fine. It's just something to keep in mind, for all of us as we go through the process. I guess that was really it for right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
But you see all these different things that come along, that's
right.
just trying to keep it in.
So each alleyway is gonna have an interesting, and as the counselor from District E mentioned, there's nuances, and there's different rules, and that's why no one has really tackled this, because once you start sticking your teeth into it, it becomes very frightening and it's scary, and like, oh, you're never gonna get through it, and so you're like, this is crazy, I'll just do something else. But I think we're gonna try to be as persistent as we can on this, at least I know that I'm gonna try to, and I think that you share that. So one of the things, my action items are this. So we all have action items tonight. My action item on the alleyway that I've identified is, now that I have the addresses, my next step is to get a hold of those abutters and reach out to them and bring them together in some shape. So I might either drop something off at their house, knowing full well though that the owners may not necessarily live there and that they may be someplace else. So I'll probably end up dropping them a letter, and informing them potentially of a meeting, that I'm gonna have, not necessarily as a housing committee, but a separate meeting. I might take the chambers maybe before a housing committee meeting or something, and invite them to come, and have this kind of discussion. And, I think as we go through this process, it would be helpful to me to have someone of your experience there to talk a little bit about, you know, the technicalities of it, but they can bring their ideas and what they want to see happen. At least they'll have a chance to meet each other, which they may not have, and then have a discussion as to what they collectively want to do and what they may not want to have an answer that quickly. So that's the thing. It can be a process. But if we could start putting them together, and each of you, obviously, we all have different styles and personalities of doing that, so we bring that to the table. That's how I'm probably gonna approach it with on that one alleyway. So, as I do that, is there any concerns that you have as far as the first step? So the first step is bringing them together, finding out what they wanna do, us listening, then providing feedback based on whatever it is, if it's reasonable, and if they can all agree on it, then we can talk about action items at that point. That's my thought.
How to
Am I
effectuate.
missing anything? Am I on?
No, I think that's right. You've already determined who the abutters are, you have the assessor field cards, and,
I have, all right, so from the assessor's office, they've given me the list of the names of the people who
Okay.
own those things. So now I've got a database. It's just a matter of sending a letter to these people.
I was gonna do that, you have it, that's great.
I have it
Yep,
on both
oh,
sides.
that's how to start, yeah.
Salem and Foster. Salem and Bailey.
Salem and Bailey.
Okay. So that's what I'm going to do. So is there any other questions on this, or as we have these experts here, before we cut this conversation off? Yeah.
The alley on the North Broadway area, east side of the street, west side of the street,
This is the one that's across from the mini mall that's there with, La Tambora and all that, and across the
does it
street.
run behind the old Firestone?
Sounds like the west side of the street.
is the-
I think it's the west side, it runs from like Tremont down
Right,
to
it
like
is.
Bradford Street.
Right, but the one that I'm referring to is Bradford. It ends at Bradford.
Yeah, we're concerned about that. We got some very bad publicity last year, towards the end of the summer. Those alleys overgrow within 1 year. They look like a jungle. There was a number of issues going on in those alleys that were illicit. We got some very ugly press on that last year. And
And
so
I'm- and
we'd
so
we'd
I'm
like to clean
thinking-
them.
I'm thinking that if as Councilor Bernard has mentioned, if the commercial people need a second way to get out or egress, then perhaps they should be looked at as taking ownership and cleaning that up. Because that's a mess back there, so if that's what they're
Always.
using as their second,
Yeah, there does seem to be, and they want to try to blame it on other folks coming in behind there, but I think that they need to take a little bit of that responsibility on it.
responsibility, because then you have the apartments here, right? And the parents, they get upset, because they said, my little girl can't look out the window because she's seeing, these sex workers doing their job.
Correct. And for the life of us, that section of the city over there has been to be blunt, has been an eyesore for years. And the way to eradicate some of that is focus a little bit more attention in those areas, clean out those little dark corners, and those folks tend to leave those areas when it's not quite so dark and the sun shines in.
Right.
We'd like to come in there and routinely maintain those. However, I don't believe those are us. Now, a lot of the ones that do abut businesses, I believe those are the alleys, the ones that we generally maintain in the wintertime, because they are used by these businesses.
Right. But they don't take care of it, because I have gone when we don't have a lot of snow, and there's just stuff all over the place, thrown all over the place. And, if it's gonna be part of your business, then you want it to look nice, you want it to look good.
The fundamental problem here, it seems to me, is that there is confusion as to who is responsible for these alleys, and that's why they're not cared for.
Right.
Everyone thinks they're our alleys because they consider them not to be theirs. They don't understand, unless you've done a random search at the Registry of Deeds for this Essex Company affidavit from 20-some odd years ago, almost. You're not going to know that the alleyway isn't owned by the city or the Essex Company. Then, even if you are aware that it was abandoned, you don't understand that that means that now you have an ownership interest and some of that's your responsibility. So maybe in conjunction with what's going to be going on here with workshops and trying to work and share a vision and make that vision reality for some of these alleys, maybe we need to, and I say we, the city with you, the council, need to develop some sort of a public information campaign
Right.
to go out and let the people know that they are responsible if they're in a butter. Now, here's the double-edged sword. The reality is that if there are properties that are overgrown and strewn with trash, and if there's evidence of infestation there, et cetera, we could have the housing department go out and enforce the code against them. The problem is that some of these abutters that we want to work with may not like that, but the reality is that's one way if we start enforcing some of the code, because a lot of these conditions are hazardous to health and safety, violate the health codes and so forth, and we can enforce it. We can force, and maybe we're not talking, at least as an initial stage, in our residential neighborhoods, but maybe in our commercial neighborhoods, maybe there where it's businesses. You say businesses, you want to be clean, you want to be inviting to your customers.
Right.
Well, maybe we start against them. It's a business expense for them. We start and say, listen, you got to clean this up, and we do it gently. You've got 30 days. You've got 60 days. It's been this way
Yeah,
for 20
I'm not saying
years.
start right away but as you begin to work with them, and if the alleyway is in fact ours, and we can
I
then
know
give
right-
it to, arrange for them to have it as part of their property, of the commercial property.
I know right now, if we go out and cite folks, and I don't mean immediately, but after a public relations campaign, if we go out and cite folks, I know that I'm going to get inundated with letters from local lawyers representing the people saying, what are you guys doing? You can't cite. But the bottom line is that is a very difficult, painful process that we may have to go through, so that, because for 100 years, people have said, it's not my property, I don't need to take care of it, it's somebody else's. Now it is their property if it's been abandoned, and they don't know that, and we need to bring them up to speed.
Oh, we need to talk
And then-
with them,
And we can do it in a friendly way.
Sure.
And the city's obviously been helping out over the years, and Groundwork Lawrence and other nonprofits and so forth, but, besides the overall goal of getting to the point where, let's say, we have an access one single access point to an alley, there's a lot to be done first to educate people. So part of, in my mind, part of this needs to be an educational process to
Right.
those people who have properties that abut alleys.
That's why
Exactly.
I'm sending that letter to those people, so that they're aware of that, and that, I'm gonna send a copy over to you. I would like for you, if you don't mind, once I draft one, I want you, if you could just look at it and
Happy
make
to.
sure it's appropriate and accurate. The question, if we go.
I will, excuse me for a
Yeah,
second.
sure.
I will try to find the section of the law about the abandonment of ways and get that to you so that, oh, you have it?
No, this is what you gave me.
No, but I will try, well, that's important. But as attachments to your letter, if you have the law that says, and I need to get it to you, but if you have the law that says, once a private way is abandoned, it's owned by the abutters up to the midpoint of the way, and you can provide that to them so that they have the reference to read it themselves.
That's helpful.
I think it'll be good, yeah.
I think that's helpful. So if we go with the gate, or whatever option, a hard option, I'm just curious, so I can, for planning purposes, are we expecting that the people who own on those streets are gonna be able to buy that, or is the city gonna put that up? Whose expense is it to put the gate up in our past experiences? Who's done that?
Private way.
It's private?
Right.
The thing with the way I'm understanding this, and please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think people will be charged any money to acquire the land because we don't own it to sell it to them.
Correct.
I think that the thing they would probably want to go out and do is hire a surveyor to make sure that they're acquiring to the midpoint, so that they're getting the accurate amount. And maybe if they all chipped in together and hired the same surveyor, it'd be much more economical, probably be a few $100s each to do it that way most economically. But aside from the surveying work to show exactly what you're owning, they're not buying it from anyone.
No, I'm talking about that. I'm talking about the actual physical purchase of the gate.
Buying the gate.
The
But
gate
that would be a
itself.
private way,
Well,
so
the other thing that
So
could
that would be
be,
a private purchase.
we wouldn't pay
We're
for
not
that,
putting that
yeah.
up, okay.
the other thing that could be done, less expensively
Yeah.
and not as effectively, is put bollards in so that you can't drive vehicles through. Would still allow pedestrian passage, but you wouldn't be able to drive a vehicle all the way through because you'd have a couple bollards at the end. It would still be a bit of, it-
Yeah,
or until some plow guy plows the snow and pushes the bollards over, like we see sometimes in the common and stuff. But, I mean, that's one way to consider it, so.
All right, so when we have that kind of roundtable discussion with the property owners, those are the kinds of questions that are going to be coming up. Why do I want to do this? Why is this in my interest? Who's going to pay for this stuff? And then I'm expecting to hear from someone, I don't have the money to pay for this. I don't have the money to chip in for a surveyor. I don't have the money to chip in for a gate. I don't have the money to clean up this area. And I'm kind of, part of me's kind of expecting to hear that.
Well, my response to that might be that depending upon the census district that the alleyway is in, we may be able to find CDBG funds, apply for a grant to deal with this. And I think it may qualify in the sense that if it's a CDBG eligible area, this is gonna go towards crime reduction, cleanliness, code enforcement, and so forth, all of the goals of CDBG. So we may be able to put in, let's say, a pilot grant. This year, the deadline's passed, but for next year, maybe, a $5,000, $10,000 grant application to get some seed money to do an alley. And help people who do not have the economic resources to contribute, to pay the surveyor, et cetera. Maybe this would help alleviate some of that. I don't know. Just a suggestion.
And that's the thought, it's a good thought. All right. We could prolong this, but unless anybody's got any dying questions, we can just cut it right here, okay?
Just that, Mr. Chair, I was thinking that the way you're thinking with public relations and explaining to people, it's not much different from what happened with the taxi and the livery. It was a real pain before, and, back in 99, 2000, we then created that department in the police, that unit in the police department to deal with and to explain it in the language that people knew best. And the complaints, they've changed, and the way that they now have all the taxis and the liveries use the same color, keep it clean, no smoking, all of that. That good stuff came from, actually doing a public relations campaign and explaining to them what they were responsible for and what we were responsible for. Because people would come in here screaming and yelling that they were abused by the police, but they didn't understand the ordinance that they had violated.
It may also be worthwhile from the city side to have someone at the workshop roundtable from the planning department, neighborhood planner, land use planner, planning director, if we have one, something like that.
Sure, the land use planner would be.
With the thought that we may be someday heading down the road towards some sort of potential CDBG funding and, you know, maybe there may be some other grant resources. You know, maybe this is being, depending upon the alley, and I understand it depends on the alley, but some of our alleys, perhaps we'd want to apply for a tree grant and put some trees in there, which would ultimately give some privacy, but it would also stop vehicles if it's an alleyway that nobody wants to drive down. Just thoughts, but planning perspective may not be a bad perspective to bring to that table.
Is that your brother?
Okay, is there any other business we want to discuss this evening, councilors? Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
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 The ayes have it.
Excuse me, do we have a motion to tape?